Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm chatting with Doug Casey. In today's interview, we get into Canada's budget and the idea of the public sector investing directly in mining companies. We get into everything that's happening with the price of gold and how Doug is planning on positioning his portfolio in this kind of market. All right, everybody, enjoy the conversation. Doug, thanks for joining us today.
Well, it's nice to be here, and at the moment here is out on the farm in quiet, peaceful Uruguay.
Well, look, our audience loves when you hop on here. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this with us. Um, I think that the big news for anybody who follows mining stocks, which our channel is kind of specifically devoted to these days, is the budget here in Canada. Now, I know you probably don't spend your time following Canadian politics that closely, but I'm sure you see some stuff. Uh, One of the scary things about it is that we are now paying more in public debt charges, in other words, interest, than we are in health services at the federal level, which is somewhat alarming. I think that we've now reached that point. But part of what the budget was supposed to deliver was this plan, this transformational plan to spur economic productivity in Canada. And part of that is the creation of what's sort of being framed as a sovereign wealth fund for critical minerals, where the Canadian government's actually going to start to take equity positions in mining companies, starting out to the tune of $2 billion. So I figured I'd start this conversation off asking you what your thoughts are on governments starting to deploy capital and play fund manager within the mining space.
It's insane, actually, counterproductive, and it's actually criminally insane because the Canadian government is taking even more capital from the private sector, where people are careful about deploying it and scattering it about to their pals, essentially, on things that they think is a good idea at the time. So I'm afraid, to start with, Canada is a sinking ship for a lot of different reasons, and that's just one of them. Uh, it's inappropriate, it's counterproductive, it's going to drive the country further towards bankruptcy, and I don't think there's any way out of it for Canada. In fact, Canada's not as bad off as Europe, but you guys are in a lot of trouble up there. Not to say that the US isn't in a lot of trouble, not to say that every country in the West isn't in a lot of trouble. So that's why I've said for years that we've been sinking towards the Greater Depression, but now we're actually at the edge of the precipice.
It certainly seems like that. I mean, and I'm sure we're going to get into what's happening with gold, and I feel like gold is the signal flare for what's happening. And I actually had a conversation a couple days ago with Rick Rule, and we got into this, so it might be interesting to get your thoughts on this. But just looking at this budget and what you're speaking of, that's happening in Europe and it's happening in the US and it's happening in pretty much around the Western world, is this dependency on institutions. And these institutions are primarily government institutions, or they have some level of funding from government institutions. And there just seems to be this lack of wanting to go out and do productive things and solve problems amongst youth today, amongst young people. And it seems like, and it feels like, culturally here in Canada, and thankfully a lot of my friends and family that I talk to don't actually watch this YouTube channel, but when I have conversations with them, there just seems to be this idea that the government could just print as much money as they want, and there's never going to be any consequences to it. And the government can just basically employ as many people as they want, and corporations are evil, and we don't have to worry about doing productive things. Uh,
Well, yeah, you're absolutely correct. The average person has absolutely no understanding of economics at all. In fact, I'm more and more disappointed with the average person as time goes on, evidenced by the election yesterday of Mamdani in New York. Uh, so it's not just Canada. that this is happening to. Uh, People have come to think that the government is their daddy, and you really don't have to work, that wealth appears magically. Uh, so, what's the reason for this? I mean, why do countries turn from being uh, productive and wealth accumulating into turning into basket cases, which Canada is rapidly turning into? Uh, I would attribute it, well, lots of causes, but perhaps the most direct cause is the educational system. Uh, Everybody wants to go to college today, but and in the past, it was viewed as an automatic road to prosperity and wealth and happiness, but it's not. Going to college today, even in Canada, where it's much less expensive than the US, is like jumping into a cesspool of bad ideas. Uh, so that's the first thing that you should erase from your mind if you're a young person. And the young people are the ones that are really in trouble today. So stay out of college. But what do you do during those 4 years when most people idiotically go to college to have their minds corrupted and their and their and their bank accounts emptied? Well, that's why I wrote a book. I've got to give you this commercial for this book, which I think is extremely important, and everybody listening should buy a
Pull it
copy
up.
of it.
It's called The Preparation, and if people want to read it, it's available on Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. And what it does is it just doesn't lay out the reasons why you shouldn't go to college. Perhaps a good idea in the past, but a bad idea today, almost universally. And what you should, more particularly, what you should do in the future with that 4 years. And the line I'm laying down is that those are the four most important years of a young man's life, and you should use them to, in effect, become a Renaissance man. Cultivate, as the Romans used to say, mens sana in corpore sano, a sound mind in a sound body, built on a sound, virtuous moral foundation, which is also part of has been washed away with the decline of Western civilization. So we lay out in this book exactly how to get a better, much, much better education than you would in college, but also a practical education, doing everything that fun things like learning Muay Thai in Thailand, learning to become a professional chef in Florence, learning to become an EMT and earn big money quickly, learning to weld, learning to drive heavy equipment, learning to open water sail, and fun things in addition, like learning to skydive and shoot guns. And so that's what this book is about. And it talks about exactly how you go about it, what it costs, how you do it. Uh, the big problem for a lot of young men, if they want to pursue this path, which they should, is their parents who are still conservative and live in the past and think that college uh, is not a mistake, which it is today in almost all cases. So, anyway, that's the commercial. And then we can talk about gold and silver mining stocks, which are perhaps more on the top of people's minds. But hey, important things should come first. And this is important.
Yeah. Okay. So I do want to follow up on that, and in that idea of there has to be a new way of thinking, and the idea of and at this point, it feels like this is just part of the economic structure. And in the US, people now take out these massive student loans where the government backs them, and then all this obscene amounts of money that's basically funded by the government for people to go study fine arts, or they might as well be studying magic at that point.
Or,
Taking
or,
on
or worse, or worse. It could be gender studies today.
Yeah, and that's just become a major part of the economic system. And for myself, when I started going out and actually working and providing value for companies, and it's funny, somebody recently approached me about they recognize me from my YouTube channel because I get to have the privilege of chatting with people like yourself, and they struck up a conversation, and then the next thing I know, they're angling me for advice on how to get a job in finance and work on Bay Street. And And I'm just sort of sitting there thinking, well, okay, first off, it's not really an appropriate time. You're my waiter to be coming and asking me for advice. Um, but but secondly, like that's not how you should be thinking about things. The way I've always made the most amount of money, and the way that I've always just been able to grow my network and 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 build experience and do cool things is to find problems and go and solve them. And and the idea of just I'm just gonna pick up the phone and call an HR department. I'm gonna get a job. I'm gonna go work in a cubicle or a corner office. I'm gonna work my way up the corporate ladder by just trying to climb an institution. I fully agree with you that that young people, they need to re-examine how the world works, and it doesn't work like that. It works by going and providing value. And I think that if my son wanted to go and work in, say, the stock market or with companies or whatever industry, I think one of the best things young people can do is go and just offer to work for free for companies. Just go and help out. Go and do productive things. Build your network, and then the opportunities will come. But so many of us, we have these terrible guidance counselors in school. They don't actually understand how things work in practice, and they give people this advice like it's just you just got to follow these steps, and it's not that simple. It's about going out there, putting yourself out there, showing up, building a network, and finding problems and going and solving them. And I and to your point, I think that's how young people need to start thinking about things. And this idea of just following the rules and going through college and then getting a corner office job, I think that's done.
Perfectly stated, Steve. I couldn't agree more. And especially in today's world, this is not the time to go out looking for a job from some big corporation. Uh, it's not a question of climbing a ladder to the top. That ladder, people below you are trying to pull you down, and people ahead of you in a corporation are trying to kick you down from above. What you want to do is build in effect, a spider web where you can branch out into any direction. And you have to qualify yourself to be able to pursue here, there, or the other place. You need as much knowledge as you can and as much experience as you can. And you're not going to get that just by limiting yourself to climbing some dumb corporate ladder. So, yes, you're absolutely correct on that. Number one. Number two, talking about people want to be investment bankers or big deal brokers or whatever. One of the other problems that we've had due to the immense amount of currency inflation that Canada and the US and everywhere suffered is that the world has become over financialized. We're much more interested, people are, in financial engineering than they are in chemical engineering or electrical engineering, things of that nature, creating real goods. So there's an excellent chance in the next few years, in fact, I'd say it's inevitable, that the financial world is going to come unglued. And people that are just shuffling paper in a moving paper fantasy today are going to be very unhappy and not have much paper to shuffle anymore. Of course, the
So
dollar is just paper.
so I got to ask you on that point because I see it the same way, and the I feel like as a young Canadian, the last decade was a lost decade where young people didn't see a whole lot of productive industries built. The number of publicly traded companies that actually operate in Canada and have Canadian operations with lots of people working for them that provide opportunity for young people. I'm talking corporations that go from seed to $1 billion valuation. There's very few of them, and like the number of Shopify's there are few and far between. So where I want to go with this is we have this reliance on the government sector, but you're right that it's going to come to a point where it's all going to just come crashing down. Do you think that that's going to be a gradual process where we're just going to increasingly see our standard of living decline? Or do you think that there's just going to come a breaking point where one day we're going to wake up, it's going to be like Black Monday and everything is just like, holy shit, what's happened?
Either is possible. Uh, in the future, look, uh, we're moving deeper into something I call the Greater Depression. A depression can best be defined broadly as a period of time when most people's standard of living drops significantly. Now, that's been going on for decades, slowly. It's been supported by the growth of technology, and it's been supported by the natural inclination of productive people to produce more than they consume and save the difference. That's countervailed against the negative things that are going on in the world. But let me say this: the amount of debt in Canada and the US is gigantic. And that has also supported people's standard of living artificially. At some point, that debt is going to be defaulted on. It's going to become insupportable. And then we have a credit collapse. And that could be a 1929 type situation. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that the government becomes more and more powerful, and to keep itself going and its minions going, prints up more money because the money goes to the rich people first today. That's why the rich are getting richer. Actually, they're close to the government and they can hire the lawyers and accountants to keep. Anyway, in which case the dollar is going to lose value faster than ever, making it foolish and even impossible for the average guy to save. So, what's going to turn this around? Uh, we're in a lot of trouble. It's going to be hard. It's going to be like turning around a super tanker. So we're headed for big, big trouble. And it's like I said, we're at the edge of the precipice now. I hate to be so gloom and doomy, especially at the moment when it's still possible on the edge of the precipice to make a lot of money in the markets. But if you're going to be in the markets, I think you have to be in resource stocks at this point because they are historically underpriced. Well, that's where I am anyway.
So since we've last chatted, the price of gold has actually gone up dramatically. It's come back a bit recently, but it's still up from the last time we chatted. And we look at that move in the price of gold where it feels like it was just a few years ago we were in the $2,000 range, and now we're sitting in the seem to be consolidating in the $4,000 range at the time of filming. Uh, do you think that the recent rise in the price of gold is telling us that inflation is coming?
Well, the average guy is not buying gold. How do I know that? There's really not a lot of activity in the gold stock market. I mean, in the last year, with the price rise of gold, small gold stocks especially have doubled, tripled, but that's nothing compared to what they've done over the five bull markets that we've experienced since gold was cut loose from the dollar in 1971. So the average guy is not involved in gold stocks at all. Institutions are not involved in gold stocks or gold anymore. They hate it. It's raping Mother Earth. It's anti DEI. It's anti ESG. So why is gold going up if the average guy is not buying it and institutions aren't? Central banks are buying it. Now, I'm of the opinion that central banks serve no useful purpose. They should be disbanded. But the major asset of central banks since the end of World War II has been US dollars. And other governments can see that the dollar is just the uh, unsupported liability of a manifestly bankrupt government. So the Chinese and the Russians and the Indians and everybody are unloading their dollars as quickly as they can. But what are they going to buy? Well, they're buying gold, which is the only financial asset which is not simultaneously somebody else's liability. That is why gold has been going up. So the central banks are going to keep buying gold, and eventually the little guy is going to get involved. I think that gold is reasonably priced now relative to houses, cars, suits, meals. It didn't used to be. That's why I've been saving in gold for the last forever and never sold an ounce, quite frankly. But now it's reasonably priced. So that's not the argument anymore. The new argument is unless the Western currency system is destroyed, and I think it will be, they're going to have to back the dollar in all currencies with a fixed amount of gold. that will be redeemable. I don't know when that's going to happen. That's the ideal. But I think we're looking, I'm not making a near term prediction, but gold's going much, much higher, 10, 15, $20,000 an ounce. And I think the US government is going to once again fix it at that price. Maybe not redeem it, but fix it because it'll create a financial asset by revaluing their gold, much the way Roosevelt did when he defaulted on the dollar in 34 or Nixon in 1971. I think they're going to try that again.
So one thing that I'm curious on what your thoughts are is when we know that retail investors are back into the gold trade. I think about when we first launched our website, which then turned into a YouTube channel and a website. Um, is that we were doing cannabis stocks, and that was in Canada from 2017 to 2020. That's kind of how the deep dive formed. Was we were doing due diligence on these various equities that as we predicted, many the vast majority of which would be zeros, and we were right about that. But we also noticed that there was all these Facebook groups for cannabis investors looking rich or looking to get rich off of pot, and you had all these Facebook groups with 25,000 active members talking about the stock market, retail investors talking about what stocks they liked. I mean, most of them didn't know anything about anything, but they were interested and they were starting to become engaged. Do you think that we're going to see a time like that come for gold stocks where I go to, my wife drags me to a party and suddenly everybody's talking about $300 million junior mining gold stocks? Will it work like that, or does mining
Yeah,
equity interest work different?
no, it works exactly that way, and that's one of the best reasons I can think of to go to the occasional cocktail party. Uh, Stay away from them generally. It's too bad we don't have magazine stands anymore because you don't need an investment letter. I speak as somebody that writes one. But all you have to do is go to a drugstore if they still had magazine racks and look at the front covers of magazines and see what they're writing about and what's on everybody's mind. The answer to the question is yeah, we're going to have a gold bubble again. It's happened 5 times since gold's been freed. It's going to happen again. And when it does happen, it's going to be explosive. And the reason is that as a proportion of the stock market, and I know everybody's interested in the stock market, but not in gold stocks for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Uh, Gold stocks, in fact, resource stocks generally, are at the smallest percentage of the stock market, just about that they've ever been, about 2%. I'm talking resource stocks in general. Uh, Oil stocks alone in 1980, which was the top of the big oil boom, were up almost 25%. Now, people aren't interested in it. That's going to change. Reality is going to overtake them. So, yeah, I'm betting on a super bubble in these things. And when a super bubble happens in these tiny little, they're not small caps, they're not micro caps. Uh, they're 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 nano caps. Some of them are pico caps. Is how small they are. Uh, yeah, it's possible to see not just 10 to 1 in the market. And I'm not. This isn't crazy talk. It's happened before a number of times. These stocks will go 100 to 1. Some of them will go an unbelievable 1,000 to 1. So yeah, I'm looking for good times. It sounds like crazy talk right now. I know.
So how are you looking at positioning your portfolio then? Are you moving along the risk curve as we see capital flow in? Is there a particular area that you're focused on that you find attractive? What can you tell us?
Well, the big money moves to big stocks first. Things like Newmont and Barrick and Rio and things like that. That's fine. Uh, I'm generally not interested in the big stocks because the big stocks are generally run by suits. They're conservative, they're stodgy. So my area of main interest is smaller producers. Why? Because right now, industry wide, all in sustaining costs uh, for gold mining companies is, say, $1,500 an ounce. But let's say gold is which it is, $4,000 an ounce, it means that producers are coining money at the moment, and they're starting to pay off their debt and buy back shares. Uh, they usually just sell shares and increase dividends. So that's where I am. It's smaller, lesser known uh, producers and exploration companies that are going somewhere. And yeah, I look at development companies that are going somewhere, and I look at exploration companies too with teeny weeny market caps. But I've got a mnemonic of nine. I call them 9 Ps. That when you're buying any kind of a stock, but especially a resource stock and especially a gold stock, you should look at 9 things so you don't forget something and make a mistake. And the number one is people. Good people make for a good business. Bad people will screw up everything and anything. So that's why I like to get to know the guys that are running companies. And it's generally the smaller companies that are run by entrepreneurs as opposed to suits who are mainly interested in moving paper. So that's where I'm looking.
All right. Well, Doug, I always appreciate when you take the time to sit down with us. We'll put the link for your book in the description below. But if you are just on Amazon and you want to look it up, the book's called The Preparation, and they can find it there.
Yes, that's where all the books in the world exist today. It's unfortunate. I miss the small bookstores, but the world changes.
All right. Well, Doug, thank you very much for doing this. And if I don't get to see you again before the end of the year, I know it's a little bit early, but I hope you have a great holiday. And I look forward to doing this again soon.
Likewise, Steve, and we'll see if we've been right or wrong in what we've been talking about.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, if you want more mining content, check out our website over at thedeepdive.ca.